Welcome to another CHRO Conversation, hosted by the Center for Executive Succession at the Darla Moore School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg, and today we are speaking with Pam Kimmet. Pam is the CHRO and a member of the executive leadership team for Manulife Financial Corporation, a multinational financial institution with about 37,000 employees, more than 70,000 agents who serve more than 30 million customers, and with over $1 trillion under management. Previously, she served as the CHRO of Cardinal Health, a healthcare services and products company with 50,000 employees in nearly 60 countries around the world. She also led the HR function at a number of global organizations, including Coca-Cola Enterprises, Bear Stearns & Company, and Lucent Technologies. Pam also serves on the board of Perspecta and formerly served on the board of Manulife Financial Corporation. Pam, thank you so very much for joining us. It's really, truly a great treat for me to get a chance to speak with you and to get your insights into the world of HR right now.
Well, it's always great to be with you and to spend time with the whole team at the Darla Moore School.
So the first thing I want to really dive into is this idea of boards. And you've been on boards, you've seen it, you've worked with them constantly. It seems that more HR people are actually making their way onto boards. And can you share a little bit about some of the opportunities that accrue from the HR professional side to actually getting that experience on the board?
Well, part of us being good in our roles is being able to exercise strong judgment and understand context. And so for me, having the opportunity to work with boards or be on a board has helped expand my sort of aperture, thinking about strategy, business context, issues, challenges, and how do you weave a solution? And so I've found it to be really, really helpful from my own experience to draw on the portfolio of wisdom from all my different board members and to see how boards have sort of chewed through big, tough issues and fashioned ideas. So I think it's really beneficial for anyone in any profession, but certainly when you're in our profession, when especially today, we're being confronted by so many issues that there's no playbook for.
And how about from the board's perspective? What are some of the clear advantages to boards having that person with that HR experience and perspective?
Well, I'll state the obvious, but it's worth bearing some repetition. And talent and culture are the most important competitive weapons any company has, frankly. And I think boards have realized this. And so bringing your curated perspective to the board discussion, I think is immensely helpful. Look, boards have accomplished leaders. That's how people become candidates for board service. But you might know, for example, we can all be accomplished and have a little understanding of operations and certainly an appreciation of finance and IT issues, et cetera. But we might not have the depth. And that's what I think having an HR leader on at the board table and in the board discussions is bringing much more dimension and depth, and not sort of a superficial sense of how do you drive engagement or why does talent matter, et cetera. So I feel that we add a richness to the discussion that might not be there if our voice wasn't heard.
How do we convince boards that they should need that richness? Exactly in the example you gave, when so many people that have risen to levels to be appropriate to be on boards kind of feel like, oh yeah, I can do an interview, I understand, I can recognize talent, that's, I can do that innately.
If you think about so many senior leaders that are now in C-suite roles, and if they've been in organizations that have been benefited by, say, more thoughtful, robust HR practices, these are leaders that now also keenly appreciate that HR, not just their CFO, but their HR leader, is a really important part of their interior cabinet to help that leader be successful. And so since they're now ascending into roles where they have an influence as to what a board composition should look like, I think that's going to catalyze seeing more HR leaders be on boards. I think that, coupled with some of the board governance discussions that go on by blue ribbon panels and the like, where they realize that when companies go astray, it's often for culture and talent issues. I think those two things are both really helpful polls. And I think the other really advantageous situation is so many of us in the profession now have had some pretty rich and robust experiences. And I think we bring good qualifications. And that might not have been true 15, 20 years ago.
Now, I know that you are passionate about helping women do more in organizations, achieve higher levels, et cetera, and you've obviously been extraordinarily successful. But do you have an explanation for why boards are not moving faster in terms of getting more women representation?
Well, I think there are some structural issues. For example, if you have a board and you have individuals on the board that are effective board members, there's usually some term limits or some age requirements, and many boards have not hit that wall where certain highly effective board members are just not timing out. So there's the issue of space, so that more women can have the chance. So that's one piece. I think secondarily, boards have been confronted now by wanting to have a lot of different specializations or constituent interests, things like IT, cybersecurity, geopolitical risks, some of those things. So that's created a little broader fanning of all the different types of skills you want to have. And unfortunately, a lot of women, it's certainly improved over the years, but a lot of women haven't pursued careers in senior IT or cyber roles. It's a more limited, say, portfolio of people out there. And then I think the other issue is many times for a lot of years, women got to a certain level in an organization and then were confronted by life choices and made choices that fit what mattered to them. And so they sort of self-selected or took a right turn. And when boards are looking at people that have ascended into certain profiles, there's not necessarily been as many. I now see boards getting more creative, recognizing the portfolio of experiences where people can demonstrate leadership and be very tuned into some key issues that are confronting board governance. So it's changing, but it's changing slowly. And I think the first point is that structural issue. There's just not the velocity of spaces. The final thing, too, I would say is there's a lot of competing diversity dimensions now that board selection reviews have to encompass, and that creates also a little more pressure for other dimensions to be represented.
So given these structural challenges, is there something that the organizations and society or in the combination should be doing to create more opportunities?
Certainly, I'll talk about the U.S. We've not necessarily been as supportive of women and families over the years as we could have been. And so that has created a bit of a right turn for a lot of highly qualified women to make some choices about other aspects of their life, their family, raising children, pursuing other personal passions, taking care of older family members, what have you, that have caused them to not stick with us in companies. And so as a result, they've had disrupted career paths, if you will. And so we've got to start there by making sure that we're creating organizational flexibility and support for people, men and women, when they have families, so that people can pursue their career aspirations and also manage their personal goals and things effectively, I guess. So that's one of the big issues. I think the second issue continues to be making sure that the board selection process is really as open and thoughtful as possible. And yes, we all rely on people that we've come to know and appreciate, but sometimes we have to really expand our aperture, just like we do at work when we look for diverse slates. I think really requiring broad and diverse slates in the board vetting process is another thing that will help.
Switching again to just some of the lessons that coming out of the pandemic, which I know it's kind of something we talk about all the time, maybe too much now, but there does seem to be, or there clearly was so much stress put on both employers and employees that it seems that there are likely to have been some changes made to how we think about talent,
et cetera. Do you have thoughts on things that are likely to be really long lasting in terms of from a talent perspective?
Oh gosh, I think we're probably at the beginning of all the things that will surface. There's the obvious ones about flexibility and where people do their work, and how open are we for certain roles to be done anywhere, and what are the implications of that to building a career path in our organization. No matter how flexible we are, I don't believe we can have certain C-suite roles where people aren't regularly together in the office in some form or fashion, and certainly traveling and connecting with the global team. So I think the curation of career paths is really a big question. And I think we're just at the beginning of it. So many companies like mine that are global, we're really anxious to see, is there going to be that interest in moving and being global citizens, so that we can have leaders that really understand the different dynamics of certain marketplaces, and build relationships across the portfolio of all the aspects of your company. So that's a big question mark. And I think the other issue too is, and this may settle out, but everybody seems more interested in change. I think we've had a steady diet of a pretty frightening time. And so as a result, one thing to feel better is to have something new. And so I'm not sure what the new thinking will be on career intervals. Like, how quickly do I need to have a new assignment? How long am I willing to do a particular role? And I think that's true at all levels of the organization, because, we're seeing right now, the only friction to changing a job for many people is to just get a new laptop delivered to their house. So I think we haven't fully yet appreciated what this period of time is going to mean to how people view careers and their willingness to move. And that's accentuated by the fact that when people are making changes right now, they're seeing big compensation adjustments many times. And so that's also fueling that interest in building maybe a portfolio of experiences across many companies, as opposed to with a company.
You really hit on a lot of really obviously important issues, but a couple that seem to be paradoxical to me are pretty interesting. One, you said, on one hand, people are, all they need is a new laptop sent to their house and they can switch. On the other hand, you said organizations are interested in understanding if people are going to be good global citizens and willing to move around the world. So how do we as organizations balance that need to give people more flexibility, and often working remotely, with us also wanting to get them together in an office location, at least on some regular basis, and also these experiences, particularly when you think about in different countries?
That is probably the biggest existential question that C-suites everywhere have been debating. And, everybody sort of has proudly announced their approach and their belief system. And I'm not sure where it's going to settle, personally. I worry about creating sort of a schism in a culture where you have a group of people that are globally nomadic and they are willing to do that, and then a set of individuals that maybe have more, shall we say, knowledge jobs, for lack of a better term that I could think of right now. But, roles like in our world, for example, customer analytics, actuarial science, certain types of IT, coding and programming and creation. Some of those things can be done from anywhere largely. And so you don't want to create this divide in your culture. You want to somehow create a sense of community, because I think all of us, our fondest memories of any place that we do work or have worked is from the relationships we built. And yes, we're all getting more aware at all generations of how to build relationships on this technology. And this technology's been a godsend for all of us on so many levels. But it's not the same as really forging those relationships with a whole portfolio of people that aren't scheduled. Today, our lives are scheduled, and we're only seeing exactly who we've set up a meeting with, as opposed to when we're in the office and we can meet a much broader array of people. So I'm really worried about creating a rift in the culture. And at the same time, I don't want to diminish the learning that comes. Well, there's many jobs you can do remotely. There's still a need for you to regularly interface with people that are on the ground, or to have a keen sense of what's going on the ground. And so that is something that I don't think we've landed on yet. We're trying to thread the needle by saying, well, we'll have core days in the office and we want to foster collaboration. But I suspect, if we're honest with ourselves, we're going to go through a few iterations before we land on a routine that really fits our culture.
And do you have thoughts on kind of early thoughts on how to keep a culture strong when so many people are away? I mean, one of the interesting things to me is so many organizations report that things like their engagement scores actually went up while people were, I would have said, less engaged. So how do we keep this kind of thing going, or more importantly, how do we keep this culture when we're not interacting in the exact ways that you described?
One of the biggest learnings last year was the power of regular communication, authentic, regular, accessible communication. And we started because, look, we were all in a crisis. Nobody really knew what was going on. And we started with weekly calls with our top 150 people. We had regular, what we call Ask Me Anything sessions with all employees, and people could write in, ask any question, and we would either say, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, here's what we think, here's what we're choosing to believe, etc. That created so much more trust and respect and a true sense of connection. Like, wow, I'm seeing these leaders work together. I'm seeing them be vulnerable. I'm seeing them be, confident. I'm seeing them be human, frankly. And that was really important. The second piece was taking time to have some fun and to be real with each other. I know in our case, we knew last summer, going into the summer, we got thinking, gosh, parents are under so much pressure. Kids have been underfoot. These poor kids, their lives have been upended. So we created something called Camp Manulife, John Hancock. And so we had a summer camp. Obviously it was virtual, but we had KiwiCo kits and we did a bunch of, interactions. We had storytelling songs. We did a bunch of things. Another thing we did was a talent program where we put out a call and we had people submit entries from around the world. Those things create special connections when people are willing to be real and to share of themselves. That I learned is probably more important than a really well-designed talent development program or talent review process or a great new learning program. Those things created a lot of glue, and that I don't want to give up as we go forward. I think that's going to remain very important, is for leaders to be accessible, connected, and real.
You're in charge of communications for Manulife, and you just described the importance of this communications. Do you think that most organizations, because what you described as kind of those weekly calls and really getting people involved when there was the beginning of the pandemic, when there was clear pandemonium going on, do you see those things really continuing? You just described them as being important. Do you see them continuing when things are a little calmer?
Well, we're continuing to make them a priority, but I would tell you we're learning to modulate as time goes by, listening really to the voice of the customer in terms of how much can people consume and how do they want to consume it and when do they want to consume it. So we've continued to revise our calendar, but to still have a really robust one. And the best example that I like to use internally when we talk about this is it's very much like when you go to university. When you're on campus as an undergrad or a grad student, you're confronted by all different types of clubs and lectures and activities and events and other things you can do. And you pick and choose from those events what you want to participate in, what appeals to you. But it still makes you feel very connected to the overall university. And that's the same thing that we're trying to foster. So for example, we've created an ongoing broad-based program around well-being. We call it Elevate. And we have different featured speakers. We had Ariana Huffington speak to us recently. We've had people come in and talk about meditation and mindfulness, and also cooking and humor and proper diet and a whole range of things. And so that's available for everybody. Doesn't mean you have to participate, but if you can fit it in your schedule or you want to listen to the recording, great. And we have a leadership series, and then we have some fun things and clubs, and we started a school after school club for kids. So we try to create a broad portfolio where people can pick and choose. And I know folks can say, oh gosh, in the time of having to edit what you invest your time and money into, you should back it up. But I think it makes it a richer connection to our company when there's this portfolio of options, so people can plug in with like-minded individuals. And that, I believe firmly, is going to be a differentiator as we go forward.
You're recognizing the need to bring people together, whether it's in person or virtually, but something to create these stronger bonds. And that also is, we're at a time in life when it seems like so many issues, particularly in the US, are so polarizing, whether that's the work from home or work in the office or anything that could even be remotely political, and a lot of things that shouldn't have been political, but just become politicized. How do you balance those kind of differences in an organization, knowing that kind of any opinion you take, there'll be what seems like half of the world will be angry with you?
That, I think, if all of us in roles like mine and all C-suite positions, if we're honest, that has been the hardest thing to thread. Because we have two responsibilities. We can have our own personal views about certain topics, but then we have to determine for our organization and what is important for our company and the places where we operate. How do we manage deciding on those issues? How do we take a position? So what we've tried to do are a couple things. One, we've tried to be open and authentic about issues. We've tried to demonstrate that where we're taking a view that might not be popular with everybody, that we're okay with people expressing a different point of view. Not wanting to create any retribution for that, but really an open environment where people can express a different point of view. And we try to be unapologetic about why we're taking a certain point of view. I'll take something simple. When we were talking about our hybrid work approach, we had a lot of discussions as a leadership team, and we said, goodness, this is going to be like exotic party planning. If we don't put some corridors on it, a lot of managers at all levels are going to burn so many calories trying to decide, well, when should my team be in because they work with that team and da 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 da. So we thought, let's just take that off the table. Let's then also recognize that Mondays are a big day for our customer. We have higher volumes on Mondays. A lot of people think about their finances over the weekend and they want to take action on a Monday. So it's a good time when we can be together to clear issues. So we said Monday's a core day in the office. And then we said Wednesday is the other core day, reflecting then that it allows people the modularity. Maybe you work Monday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office. Maybe it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Maybe it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But to try to create some flexibility so people can manage other aspects of their life. Well, we had so many people. Why did you pick a Monday? Why couldn't it be, Tuesday, Wednesday? Why is it this? Why is it that? And we just kept explaining, here's why we declared days. Here's why we did it. It wasn't popular with everybody, but we had the conviction and we felt that we'd thought about it. Now, that doesn't mean we're dogged and we never change our minds, because sometimes we do take different feedback, especially as we've talked about diversity and inclusion. There have been different perspectives that have come forward, and we'll reflect and we'll respond sometimes saying, you know what, people have raised this. It's caused us to think about it, and we're going to take a new tack. So it's really threading that balance of not being afraid to take a point of view, but really being still open.
So we hear so many different stories, again, in terms of many people saying that very issue has, or people coming from different backgrounds, et cetera, have described that being able to work from home has allowed them to really be more of themselves, and that it's allowed them to engage better in the workplace. On the other hand, we see a lot of evidence that becomes that onboarding, like when we bring people in, is an even bigger challenge for some of the groups that have kind of traditionally been marginalized in other ways. Again, do you have any thoughts on how we create this most inclusive culture by trying to respect, again, those type of issues that are, again, in person, together, remotely, bring your whole self, et cetera?
Well, there's sort of two key levers that help. but this is something we have to stay on, and there's no quick or easy fix. One lever is, in general, even before you think about DEI issues, is training managers to be stronger managers. In most companies, there is that frontline layer of managers who manage 85% of the people in the company. And in most companies, that is a group that has been overlooked and hasn't been given regular investment in learning how to be a good coach, how to plan the team's time, how to think about what's getting in the way of that team's engagement, how to communicate effectively with the team, how to appreciate you might have a portfolio of folks that some are introverts, some are extroverts, some have different life experiences. How do you bring them together? That is an area that it doesn't matter the places I've worked, we've systemically underinvested in that. And I think now when you're managing teams, sometimes that are in office and sometimes that have never even met each other, it becomes even more important to have strong managerial skills and to invest in that group. Second thing is allyship. It's a word that we all use a lot, but not everybody really understands what it means. And so that's a place where we're continuing to put more effort, is to continually unpeel the onion on what does it mean to really be an ally? How do I have uncomfortable conversations so I can learn more? How, if I make a mistake, because that usually gets in the way of allyship, is people are afraid to offend somebody or hurt somebody's feelings. And so hence the conversation goes unspoken. And then people fill in the blanks because the conversation goes unspoken about each other's motives. So really driving allyship is another important part, because, well, that manager has a duty to connect and include and respect that everybody has a different wiring and personal work style. So does every colleague. And so those are the two biggest levers that can help us.
You've been part of the Center for Executive Succession from the very beginning of its own. Can you say a little bit about how your partnership with CES, or in general CES's role, is in any way helpful?
Oh, goodness. It's in many ways helpful. You know, the original catalyst for this was that all of us were confronted by knowing that we had to help and were engaged in succession discussions with our CEOs, with our boards, with both actually. But everybody, it was very shrouded, and a lot of people didn't have the opportunity to openly share in a safe space some of the learnings, because let's face it, there's as much art as there is science to this work. And so through creating a forum of like-minded individuals who wanted to be thoughtful, who wanted to keep iterating and improving how we do this work, we've been able, I think, to shine a light on practices that work very well, toolkits that we should all really follow in how we think about setting up our processes. And that has been incredibly helpful for me. I know for all of the colleagues associated with the center. And frankly, now as the center has branched out and added board member perspective, it's very helpful for board members too, who maybe they're a CEO or a retired CEO, so they've experienced some succession, but they haven't experienced it multiple times over. And so having those guideposts has been really helpful. And of course, I have to give a shout out to the great faculty, because there's a research and an academic aspect to this too that really helped us sometimes either support a belief that we have around succession or debunk a myth. And it's fact-based, it's research-based. So that's been really, really helpful too.
Of course, Pam, I love hanging out and talking to you. So thank you very much for your time and all of your wisdom and sharing your insight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anthony. It's always great to be with you too. So thanks so much.
You just listened to another CHRO Conversation. Today, Pam Kimmet of Manulife shared her views regarding the role of HR as a strategic partner in driving business success and the value of bringing an HR perspective to the board. She also shared her thoughts on how HR plays a critical role across a number of different industries. On behalf of all of us who are associated with the Master of Human Resources program and the Center for Executive Succession here at the University of South Carolina, thank you for joining us.